So good evening, everyone. Welcome back. I see not only members of my own congregation, but some familiar faces from other programs. Judy Mannix, I get to see you tonight here. So welcome back. And again, we're happy to have Sister Carolyn Osiek. So without further ado, I would like to bring Sister Carolyn back so she can instruct us.
Okay, hello everybody. Well, tonight this is, or this morning, or wherever it is where you are. This will be a kind of a run for our money because I've been spending a lot of time on this, trying to make it coherent and try to put in everything that needs to be put into it. So this is Mary Magdalene in text and tradition, history and legend, and there's plenty of all of it. First of all, what or where is Magdala? And you'll see that even that is not easy to answer. On the map, you see the Lake of Galilee, Tiberias here, which should be spelled with an AS, not a US, and Magdala supposedly here. And then these two names, Dalmanutha and Magadan, are other names that occur in the Synoptic Gospels, and nobody really knows what they refer to. Then Capernaum up here. And on the way down here, if those of you who are familiar with the place who've been there, there's another place called Tabgha right there, but that's not a biblical place. Okay. So the Lake of Galilee is 690 feet below sea level. Okay, so whatever is along the shore there is well below sea level. About 25 miles as the crow flies is Mount Tabor, and that's 1,900 feet above sea level. So you get a sense of topography, not very flat, except right along here on the photo on the left. It is flat for a little while. I have taken many groups, study groups and pilgrimages to the Holy Land, and one time we were trudging along and somebody said to me, "You said that it would be a lot of walking, but you never said that it would never be flat. It would always be up or down." And pretty much it is. But the aerial view you see on the left is of the site that is presumed to be Magdala. This is a south-facing photo, so this road that goes up to the top of the picture goes to Tiberias. This is what it looked like before 2009. And there are two archaeological sites, one here and another over here. And in between, an open space. So that's what it looked like then. And there was a sign there, which I don't think is there anymore, that says Magdala, but then the Hebrew says Migdal. So Magdala, Migdal, it's the same word. Magdala is Aramaic, Migdal is Hebrew, and there was formerly an Arab village there of Al-Migdal, so that clearly comes from the same name, from Migdal. The two words in Aramaic and Hebrew mean tower, okay? The sign here gave a little history that said the birthplace of Mary Magdalene and its reputation for being a place that did a lot of fish processing, etc. It was kind of a general introduction. So Magdala and Migdal, we know that now. But the trouble is that in the New Testament period, as far as we can figure out, it was mostly called Taricheia or Taricheie, which means exactly processing a fish. So if it was, some people think the title was Migdal Taricheie, that would mean fish tower. And so the two ideas of the tower, and there are a number of other places that are called with tower as well, or salted fish, which was probably the main occupation in the city. Now, in the early 1900s, when it was Ottoman Empire, the Franciscans of the Custody of the Holy Land acquired some of this property. at the same time that they acquired the property up at Capernaum and Tabgha. They began excavating, first at Capernaum and then at Tabgha, and then they wanted to also excavate at Magdala, and they were only able to do that for 2 seasons. These are some excerpts from Virgilio Corbo's dig report in 1974. Magdala, home of Mary, had disappeared like all the rest. Only a wall and some tombs were known because of the making of a road and canal from Tabgha. Since digging at Capharnaum, we wanted to dig Magdala, to have 2 sites from the same period. So November 71, Stanislas Lofreda and I began at Magdala, financed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Italy in land owned by the Custody of the Holy Land. Up to now, we've worked 2 seasons, 71 and 73. 72 was canceled for lack of personnel. The Franciscans bought the ground from the Arab village of Al-Migdal and built the stone wall around it. The custody intended, that's the Franciscans, intended eventually to buy the whole village. Up against the wall was a fine mosaic, but the superior from Tiberias told the workers to plant tomatoes right over it, and it ruined the mosaic. Later, the superior from Tiberias denied it all. Now, in 1948, at the creation of the State of Israel, the entire Arab village was destroyed. But property that in 1948, the property that was previously owned by other entities was respected, and so the Franciscans maintained their control of it. And so from 71 to 2009, this is what the site looked like. There were the wall that the Franciscans built over there on the left, some monumental buildings. You'll notice that all the stone looks black, and it is. It's volcanic stone that is indigenous to the whole region. They say there were volcanoes millennia ago in the Golan Heights that dumped all of this volcanic stone here. And so for a long time, everything was built out of that because the stone was readily available. One of the buildings had these heart-shaped columns, which are known from other places too. The advantage is you can look at it from both angles and see it looks like a column. So this is what it looked like until 2009, at which time it was acquired. I'd love to know the story how this happened. I don't. By the Legionaries of Christ, the Catholic organization whose the lay branch is Regnum Christi, from Mexico. And they conceived the idea of making a major center here in honor of Mary Magdalene. And so they began excavating and building. And today it looks like this. So we have an upscale guest house and restaurant and church, but also some extensive excavations. Now, I don't think that the Legionaries of Christ intended that they were going to have a major archaeological site here, because there had already been some excavation that hadn't really found much. And didn't they find a synagogue, a rather impressive synagogue? And now they found a second one as well. And this site was abandoned after the war, the rebellion against the Romans in 70. It was not occupied again until the 6th century, when there was a monastery, and then a couple of centuries later, the Arab village. So anything here that turns up that cannot be identified as 6th century is pre-70. And so they have this, and the church, which is called Duc in Altum, based on Luke 5:4, the story of the disciples are fishing all night, they don't catch anything. Jesus says, put your nets into the deep, and of course they caught a bunch of fish. And Duc in Altum is Latin for put it into the deep. It's a quite lovely church. That's the lake behind you there. in the window, and it's open for any pilgrims who wish to have prayer, mass, whatever. So it is quite a lovely place, and it's in honor of St. Mary Magdalene. There's another chapel to the side that is hers, and they're very serious about having programs for women, particularly. Now, in that synagogue, they found this thing that's called the Magdala stone that nobody knows what to do with. Nobody has ever seen anything like this before. It is 24 by 20 inches, 18 inches high. It's carved of native limestone. And you can see that the top has this lovely rosette design. And on the small side, you see a menorah. There's the small side again, the upper picture on the left. This is the earliest known surviving representation of the menorah in the world. It's a representation of the huge menorah that we know from descriptions was in the temple courtyard in Jerusalem. You can see the picture on the right that the top is not level. It is deliberately slanted. So not probably meant to be a table on which you'd put things like cups or anything like that. Maybe a scroll. We simply do not know. And all of this is at the site that is now called Magdala. So what does the place have to do with the person? Let's move now to the person of Mary of Magdala, or Mary Magdalene. She, in Matthew, Mark, and John, there are 3 references to her in each gospel, and it's Maria he Magdalene. So Mary Magdalene, or Mary the Magdalene, but the is simply, it would be there. It's not stressing the. So it's Mary Magdalene, which is an adjective. It's not Magdala, it's Magdalene. It's an adjective about Magdala. It's like saying somebody from Washington is a Washingtonian, In Luke, the name occurs twice, and the first time in chapter 8, it's Maria Hekalumene Magdalene, the one who is called Magdalene. In other words, that's her nickname, or that's the one among all the Marys, that's the one we're talking about here, to ascribe that to her. And then he simply reverses the order in 24 and says, Magdalene Maria, the Magdalene Mary. Okay, so the name is Magdalene, and which means from Magdala, or Migdal in Hebrew. Now, let's just look for a moment at this very important passage, which we have looked at briefly before. It's at the beginning of chapter 8. Jesus made his way through towns and villages, preaching and proclaiming the kingdom of God. And the 12 were with him, and some women who had been healed of evil spirits and illnesses. Mary, called Magdalene, from whom 7 spirits had gone out, and Joanna, wife of Herod's steward Chuza, and Susanna, and many others, who provided for them out of their resources. Okay, so some women who had been healed of evil spirits and illnesses. This is something we won't go into in detail now, but there's a very fine line in the Gospels between demonic possession and illness, because illness was mostly believed to be caused by evil spirits. So exorcism and making people whole physically and spiritually it's a very close, tight connection. So, and seven spirits. 7 is it's a symbolic number. 7 days, the Sabbath, the cycle of seven. How many stories do you know where there are 7 brothers, and it's a kind of a natural narrative number, like 3, and 7 spirits had gone out. It's interesting. It doesn't say Jesus exorcised them. It says they left. And how are we to understand that? I think presumably some kind of excuse me, some kind of illness, perhaps mental illness, and then Joanna and Susanna. Joanna, interestingly, is called wife of Chuza, not widow. There's another word for widow, and she's not a widow, she's a wife. So she's got a husband somewhere. And as one commentator, Elizabeth Moltmann Wendell, said, she was following somebody of whom her husband surely would not have approved. So you have a little incidence here of presumed independence. Susanna we know nothing about. Now, the question is, and this is my translation, and I've done it exactly with the kind of punctuation that is in the Greek, and they're and, So at what point does the healed of evil spirits and illnesses stop and other women included? I think at many others. I think Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Susanna are meant to be exorcised, whatever, or healed. And then there are also many others who don't belong in that category, okay? It's the many others who are intriguing, and we've looked at that when we were doing, I said, how do you imagine groups of disciples, those many others who are of women who are there. Now, they provided for them out of their resources, diakonun. They did diakonia. It's the verb for the diakonia word, which we're going to look at in 2 weeks in more in depth. But it's the same expression that in Mark at the very beginning. Peter's mother-in-law had a fever, and he healed her, and it's the same thing. She does the same verb to perform diakonia, which is some kind of service, but not necessarily in a subservient way. Diakonia is freely given service. And it's out of their resources, out of their stuff, their goods. So Luke presupposes here that these are women who are pretty well to do, okay, that they can do that. I don't know what age you imagine these women to be. Even Mary Magdalene, of course, the Jesus Christ superstar syndrome is in the Dan Brown is, a romantic alliance, and therefore would have to be fairly young. But what if these women were older? There are people who seem to have free disposal of their goods. And what if they were more like mother figures for the male disciples? That's another way to maybe think about it. So at the cross and the tomb, and we've looked at this before too, MM is Mary Magdalene, and just look, she's there every time, and all of the others change. They're more or less consistent within the same gospel, but they're not from gospel to gospel. In Luke, Luke does not name the women at the cross because he has already named them, you see, in chapter 8. So it's Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Susanna, and of course the others, the many others. John, we've already looked at. And it's Mary Magdalene, as we know, who comes to the tomb while it is still dark. So we have something very different in John. But it's Martin Hengel, a German New Testament scholar years and years ago, who had an article about Mary Magdalene in which he suggested that she was to the women disciples what Peter was to the male disciples, the leader and the spokesperson, and that seems to be what the profile is. So let's look now at the scene in John, the two parts of it, John 20, verses 1 to 2, and then 11 to 18. So in 1 to 2, Mary comes to the tomb while it is still dark, and it doesn't say why she comes. There's no anointing here. There's no who's going to roll back the stone. There's none of that. She just comes, and she sees the stone is rolled back and the tomb is empty. But she doesn't get it. She misinterprets when she runs back to the other disciples and says, they've taken him, and I don't know where they've taken him. And this is a poignant kind of a situation for Mary, because I think of how difficult it is for people who lose loved ones and there is no body. 9/11, all kinds of situations in which there is no body to claim. And that's her situation. I think she's thinking, as long as there is there's something physical here, that I can get close to. Think of how comforting it is for many people to go to the cemetery, to the burial of a loved one, even if it's ashes, to know where is the last remnants of this person. And that's what she's deprived of. And that's what I think is her anguish. So she runs back and tells the other disciples, and Peter and the other disciple, the unnamed disciple, come. Remember, he runs faster, but he waits for Peter to go in. Peter goes in, and there's this whole description of how neatly everything is folded, but it doesn't say what Peter's response was. The other disciple saw and believed. He has to. He's the one who is going to do it right, So they presumably go back. Do they cross paths with Mary again? That's not clear. So Mary comes back to the tomb, and this beautiful sequence, by the way, is not in a Sunday lectionary reading. It is Tuesday of Easter week, and also a Feast of Mary Magdalene, but it never hits Sunday. So Mary goes back, and the encounter there where he says her name. She thinks he's the gardener, and says, "If you know where they took him, let me know. I'll go and get him." She's still onto this. The body is missing, and it's interesting that idea also crops up in Matthew's Passion narrative, but it's the disciples who are going to steal the body. It's a group of chief priests and Pharisees who come to Pilate after Jesus is buried and say, he said he was going to rise after 3 days, so let's put a guard so his disciples can't come and steal the body and then say he's risen. So it would be the disciples who have stolen the body. Whereas here, it's not the disciples. And it never says, what is Mary thinking? That somebody's going to steal the body, But that's her interpretation. So, the poignant encounter of Jesus, of Mary and Jesus when he speaks her name. And it has been suggested over the years that this is an echo of the Song of Songs. the beloved the woman who seeks her beloved. Then, of course, she wants to hang on to him. She's found him. And he says, no, go tell my brothers that I ascend to my God and your God. And Mary Magdalene then comes announcing to the disciples that it's a tricky statement here. It jumps from third person to second to back to third again. Mary Magdalene came to the disciples and said, I have seen the Lord, first person. And then it goes back to third person. And these things he said to her. Well, that provokes a whole outpouring of speculation. Hippolytus, in his commentary on the Song of Songs in the 3rd century, is the one who says that, the first one to say that that Mary Magdalene to the tomb is the woman seeking her beloved. So we have a number of trajectories in the traditions, and we're going to try to look a bit at each one of them. First of all, the revealer of secrets, that Jesus at that moment at the tomb gave Mary secret revelation, because it just says, and these are the things he said to her, and John does not elaborate on that, just leaves it hanging. And there's a very early confusion with Mary of Bethany, with the unnamed woman of Luke 7, and we've got Gregory to partially thank for that, and we'll get to that. But also Mary of Egypt, another legendary character. So let's look at each one of them. The revealer of secrets, the big one here is the Gospel of Mary. There are others, the Pistis Sophia and a couple of other Gnostic documents. But the Gospel of Mary is the one that goes into this the most. It's a document that is incomplete and in Coptic, and it's probably 3rd, 4th century, though the text itself could be earlier than that. It's Gospel of Mary, and we assume Mary Magdalene. People have tried to make a case that it's Mary, the mother of Jesus, but I don't think it really works. I think it is meant to be Mary Magdalene. So just before chapter 9, the disciples are sitting around and they're saying, what do we do now? What did the Savior tell us? And what comes next? And Mary is there, and she stands up and she says, well, I could tell you what he said to me. And so they say, please do. And then you have a Gnostic monologue. It's esoteric. It's you don't want to go into it. So then comes here, chapter 9. When Mary had said this, she fell silent, since it was to this point that the Savior had spoken with her. But Andrew answered and said to the brethren, say what you wish to say about what she said. I at least don't believe that the Savior said this. For certainly these teachings are strange ideas, and they are really strange ideas, for us anyway. Peter answered and spoke concerning these same things. He questioned them about the Savior. Did he really speak privately with a woman and not openly to us? Are we to turn about and all listen to her? Did he prefer her to us? Now, this is an echo of something that occurs in some of these other documents, a kind of a rivalry between Peter and Mary. And if indeed Mary is, if Hengel was right, that Mary is the spokesperson for the women, then do you have traditions in the early church that want to put all the authority on Peter? Because there's certainly, in every gospel, Peter stands out in some way as a leader. a fallible leader, certainly, but as a leader. And what if there's a group of women who are saying, no, we believe what Mary Magdalene said, and we are going to credit her with authority. There's something like that that's reflected here, you see, and the usual kind of put down for the woman, you know. So Mary, it made Mary cry. She wept and said to Peter, "My brother Peter, what do you think? Do you think I've thought this all up myself in my heart, or that I'm lying about the Savior?" Levi answered and said to Peter, "Peter, you've always been hot-tempered. Now I see you contending against the woman like the adversaries." Another translation says like the enemies. It's same idea. Who do you suppose are the adversaries? We know that there were different groups in the early church with different kinds of theology and ascribing their authority to different apostolic figures. And it could well be that this reflects another tradition based on apostolic authority, but not in agreement, in theological agreement with this group. But Levi goes on, "If the Savior made her worthy, who are you indeed to reject her? Surely the Savior knows her very well. That is why he loved her more than us. Rather, let us be ashamed and put on the perfect man, the perfect human being, and separate as he commanded us, and preach the gospel, not laying down any other rule or other law beyond what the Savior said." And when they heard this, they began to go forth and to proclaim and to preach. And this echoes then the traditions that occur in a number of sources of the 12 going off in all kinds of directions. This is after Pentecost, of course, presuming a Pentecost in this narrative. The Thomas to India, for example, all in different directions. So this echoes that tradition. But isn't that interesting about Mary, about the authority of Mary? As I said, there are a couple of other Gnostic texts that don't go into it like this. Pistis Sophia, it has both Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Mary Magdalene, both as authorities, as leaders, but it's not so pointed as this is, with the real questioning of, well, first of all, of putting forth Mary's authority, and then having Peter question it. So it's an interesting document which may reflect something in the early church. Confusion with Mary of Bethany, the sister of Martha and of Lazarus in John. Yeah, there is a lot of confusion in the manuscripts as well as in the tradition. In Matthew, I said last week, I think, or no, maybe 2 weeks ago, in every gospel, some woman does something to either Jesus' feet or head, but they're all different. In Matthew and Mark, it's 6 days before the Passion, and it's an unnamed woman at the house of Simon the leper in Bethany, and she anoints Jesus' head with perfume. Nothing about her being a sinner, just an unnamed, she's just a woman who comes in and does this. Luke 7, of course, back in the middle of the gospel, we have this unnamed woman who is a sinner, who washes his feet with her tears and dries them with her hair. A bit of an exaggeration, I think, to that she's got that many tears, but it's this unnamed woman. John 12, we're again 6 days before the Passion, but it's the house of Lazarus and Martha. Doesn't say the house of Lazarus and Martha and Mary. It's the house of Lazarus and Martha. And Mary anoints his feet. Which Mary? Presumably Mary, the sister of Martha and Lazarus. It doesn't say that, but I think you have to presume that from the context. Now, here's a classic Mary Magdalene image in icon style. And she's holding the cross, so she's an apostolic figure, a proclaimer of the word. But look what's in her left hand. It's a perfume jar. And so even here, Mary Magdalene is being confused with Mary of Bethany, with the perfume. A 17th century artist, Carolyn Osiek, is painting Mary Magdalene. All these pictures you're going to see are the artists think they're painting Mary Magdalene, but she's got the perfume jar. And so she's confused with Mary of Bethany, if Mary of Bethany is another person. Caravaggio does this interesting depiction of Martha and Mary. And look at this. He does such wonderful things with the light. Martha is the one on the left, and she seems to be trying to reason with Mary. So maybe this is the, why are you leaving me to do all the work? But she's not asking Jesus. It's Martha. I mean, it's Mary. Look at the difference in the way they're dressed. Martha's in very ordinary clothing. Mary is all dolled up, and her hair is done up with a little curl in the forehead. Her left hand is on a mirror, so she's concerned about her appearance. In front of her, I'm not sure what that is in the jar. I think it's some kind of cosmetic, but the rectangular looking thing is a comb. So adornment, she's concerned about adornment. Just look at the difference in the presumed difference in the personalities of the way they are portrayed. This is not Mary of Bethany in Luke, who in Luke 10, who sits at his feet. This is a Mary who's quite concerned about her appearance. Is she really Mary of Bethany as described, or is she Mary Magdalene in the guise of the prostitute? Confusion with the unnamed sinner of Luke 7. And of course, we have Gregory the Great in his homily 33. This is 591, which is rather late on the scene for the development of all these traditions, who assumes the identity and asserts that, I think that, the sinful woman is Mary Magdalene and Mary of Bethany. So he puts them all together. We dump on Gregory for this, and rightly so, but I don't think he made it up. I think he is, there's uncertainty. People are saying one thing and another, and people are asking the questions, and he's answering what he thinks, that they're all the same person. It's interesting to look at the whole context of that. He doesn't do that to put her down, but rather he praises her as a model of repentance and then of compassion for others, unlike a lot of people, he says, that I know, including bishops. So he's got a pastoral use for it. It's just that he's the first one who actually we have in writing to say he thinks they're all together. Confusion with the unnamed sinner. Ah, yes, this is a painting supposedly of Mary Magdalene, and so not quite terribly repentant yet, I think. I have been unable to find the artist for this. If anybody recognizes it, let me know. Now, also confusion with Mary of Egypt. Mary of Egypt is an elusive figure. Mary the Egyptian, she's called sometimes. And that's really what she's meant to be here in this modern icon. We know most about her from the life of Mary of Egypt by Sophronius, who was Patriarch of Jerusalem in the 630s. And the story it's a typical kind of story. This is a woman of means from a small town, young girl from a small town, and she goes to Alexandria at the age of 12 and engages in prostitution. And it's an exaggerated story. It's like she's addicted to sex, and sometimes she doesn't even want to charge her customers because all she wants is the sex. It's really a quite exaggerated kind of depiction of this woman. But she decides at a certain point to go on pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Everybody else is doing it. Why, she'll do it too. And she is about to enter the Church of the Anastasis, which we now call the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. They called it the Church of the Resurrection. And some unseen force prevents her from going in. She quickly repents and sees her whole life before and sees how it has to change and is able to walk into the church. After which, she takes off for the desert. And so she becomes one of the desert mothers, but not one who gathers a community around her. She lives as a hermit for the rest of her life. One source says 30 years. And supposedly there was one of the desert fathers who encountered her, and she told him her story and said, would you come back next year at this time with communion, with Holy Communion for me? Which he did. And then she said, come back again the next year. And when he came back the next year, he found her dead. And so this story, it's legendary. Is there any basis in fact? Who knows? Two suppositions are that she died in 421 or 530, and that's because it has to be a year when in the details of the story, that Easter falls on April 4th. But these are depictions of Mary Magdalene. The one by Titian on the left she's still a bit titillating, she's got a breast sticking out there, but she is a desert ascetic. The skull under the book is the sign of the ascetic. And in various traditions, whether she went off to Egypt, if she is the same as Mary of Egypt, well, obviously she's not because of the centuries difference, or in the uplands of southern France, and we'll get to that too. The one on the outside, the other side, Donatello, really the ascetic, and it is meant to be a depiction of Mary Magdalene after she has been living this ascetic life, which also spawns the tradition of Mary Magdalene as being entirely covered by hair, her own hair. Her modest adornment is her hair, which which leads to the nickname Hairy Mary. And we have an assumption of Mary Magdalene. Two well-known painters painting her being, after she died, being born to heaven on the wings of angels. On the right, Domenichinos, she's sort of running faster than they are to get there. In both cases, in the Domenichino, she has maybe a little cap on or something. In the other one, she's bareheaded. And again, the bareheadedness in depictions of biblical women it means questionable reputation. So she's still got that, even though she's now victoriously triumphant and being born to heaven. And then there is the Roman story. You may have seen this painting before. I found it this afternoon at on a website of a parish in Ireland. I don't know who the painter is, and I would like to know. I didn't. If I look harder, I can probably find it. So this is the story, and I am unable to find out what's the source, what's the earliest representation of this. Everything I look at says the story goes, or legend has it, clearly very legendary, that Mary Magdalene went to Rome. Now, this is also supposed to be a story that comes from the East, and yet the site is Rome, so I kind of question that. She went to Rome, presumably traveling by herself. I mean, there's nothing in the story about any companions. And she had an audience with the Emperor Tiberius, which would have been pretty hard because after the year 26, he lived till 37, but after 26, he almost never spent time in Rome. But anyway, the story goes that she had the audience with the Emperor Tiberius, and she's trying to convert him to Christianity. And he says, I'll do that. I'll convert. Oh, sorry, I have to back up. She's using an egg as part of her preaching. The egg as the neither end nor no ending, no beginning, the endless cycle, life coming out of something that doesn't seem to be alive, etc. So she's using the egg, and he says, I'll convert when that egg turns red. Whereupon immediately the egg turned red. So sometimes you will see this depiction with a white egg and sometimes with a red egg. The story does not go on to say, however, that Tiberius was converted. But apparently this is the source of the tradition of coloring eggs at Easter. So I'll bet you didn't know that Mary Magdalene had anything to do with colored eggs at Easter, but it is that way, apparently. Then, of course, we have medieval stories of Mary Magdalene, sister of Martha, and brother Lazarus. And the tradition is that they got on a boat with no rudder, no sails, no oars, and set sail and landed in Marseille in southern France. And from there, that Mary Magdalene, after a whole preaching career, which I'll show you in a minute, some representations of that, died and was buried at Saint-Baume, which is up in the hills not very far from Marseille, where today the Dominicans have a hospice for visitors and church. And apparently it's a 45-minute hike up to a grotto, which is where presumably Mary Magdalene was buried. I've never been there. Maybe somebody here has. Then in the 11th century, the tradition has it that they found the bones of Mary Magdalene at Saint-Baume, and they moved them to Vézelay. And so now you have, as you probably know, a beautiful, beautiful cathedral in Vézelay. And from there we go to Dan Brown and the Divinity Code and Jesus Christ Superstar and, all kinds of other speculations. Now, one of the things you also need to know, but I'm not going to go into much detail about this because it really is, don't bother with it. The manuscript accuracy, excuse me, about these names of Mary and Martha is crazy. There are many, many variants where, for example, Martha is not even in the story where she should be in the story otherwise. There are just the names are very fluid in the traditions, and copyists, people who are copying things, copying the biblical text, sometimes don't know what to do with it, and they kind of make it up as they go along, I think. Excuse me. Yeah, these are images of Mary Magdalene preaching in Marseille. And you see all kinds of people in both cases, men and women, engaged in her preaching. And you see, I think this goes back to that line in John 20:18. These are the things I have seen the Lord, and these are the things he said to me. The I have seen the Lord, by the way, the exact formula, the way it's said, interestingly, is exactly what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 7, when he just puts it into a question. Have I not seen the Lord? Am I not an apostle? Have I not seen the Lord? Uses the same verb, same tense, everything. And there it's connected with apostleship, so that is part of the whole tradition that we're going to get to about Mary being apostle of the apostles. I think it's related to not textual dependence, but I think it's certainly related to Paul's attestation of his apostleship. Now, I introduce a bit of pastoral complications. Okay, so Mary Magdalene's not a prostitute. Okay, all right, fine. I have a friend who is a chaplain in a women's prison, a state women's prison, and where a number of residents have sometimes other crimes as well, but prostitution. A lot of them were engaged in sex work. They are still on the tradition that hasn't been changed in their understanding of Mary Magdalene being a prostitute. And they say, well, if she could make it, I can make it. If she could change her life around, I can change my life around. And if Jesus loved her just as she was, then maybe he loves me just as I am. And this chaplain says, I am not about to change that and say she wasn't a prostitute. So that's just something to think about. You may know that in 2016, Pope Francis upped her from having just a memorial to having a feast. And it says that the church has always regarded St. Mary Magdalene as the first witness of the Lord's resurrection and the first evangelist. Yeah, sure. And in the second paragraph, the church is called to reflect in a more profound way on the dignity of women and the new evangelization. And so that's fitting that she should have this feast, because all of the 12, have feasts. They're not memorials, they're feasts. And she did not have one, and now she does. So this woman, third paragraph, known as the one who loved Christ and greatly loved by Christ, and a witness of divine mercy by St. Gregory the Great, an apostle of the apostles by St. Thomas Aquinas, can now rightly be taken by the faithful as a model of women's role in the church. Okay, so now we have the feast. Now this is amazing. Thomas Aquinas, I didn't know this. He, of course, is late on the scene on this. Hippolytus is the first one, 3rd century, the first one who calls her apostle of the apostles, but it's a long tradition. But now look at this. Notice the 3 privileges given to Mary Magdalene. First, she had the privilege of being a prophet because she was worthy enough to see the angels, for a prophet is an intermediary between angels and people. Secondly, she had the dignity or rank of an angel, insofar as she looked upon Christ, on whom angels desire to look. Thirdly, she had the office of an apostle. Indeed, she was an apostle to the apostles, insofar as it was her task to announce our Lord's resurrection to the disciples. Thus, just as it was a woman who was the first to announce the words of death, Eve, So it was a woman who would be the first to announce the words of life. Not bad from Thomas Aquinas. So a little reading if you want more. Anne Graham Brock's book is 2002. It's one of the first to lay it all out. There are many books about Mary Magdalene, and some of them are about the Gospel of Mary too, and Holly Herond. But the one that's really so good is Carla Ricci, Mary Magdalene, and many others. That's way back in 1994. But there are plenty of copies of that, used copies available on Amazon. I looked, there were over 30 available. So and it's also available on on digital. So will the real Mary Magdalene please stand up? Because Mary Magdalene is a mysterious figure. And we have to ask ourselves why the fascination with this character. It got a late start. Thecla was the most popular saint in the early church, and we'll talk about her probably in 2 weeks. And Mary Magdalene, it's not until like the 5th, 6th century, and then it takes off. But Middle Ages too, big in the Middle Ages. So there you have it. So I'm sure some of you have something to say. Rita says, let's start a Carla Ricci book reading group. Yes, Rita Huland is a real advocate of Carla Ricci's book. Yeah, we're trying, in fact, to locate her. She did her doctorate in Bologna, and I met her in the late 90s. And then she's apparently not published anything else and kind of slipped away. But it's a great book. We have some in the chat. Okay. Thank you. Good, fascinating presentation. What do I do here? Wait a minute. Why do you think they had much? Why do you think they had much? Often, like the widow, people give of the little they have. Well, it just that it says they provided out of their means. I mean, it didn't say that it was the last thing they had, but sure, could be that. What do you make of the teaching that her name was Mary Tower? Yeah. Jerome is the first one to suggest that Magdala isn't really, that she wasn't really from Magdala at all. That it's just that she's a tower of strength. I have no sympathy for that. As a secondary interpretation, yes, to apply more meaning, but I do think she was from a place. The problem is that that those scholars are right that the place wasn't called Magdala then. It comes back to the name Magdala in the 6th century. So when you have this monastery, and from then on, it's a place of pilgrimage because of Mary Magdalene. So there's a gap there when we really aren't sure. So you had a question, Maria.
I did. I'm not sure I phrased it properly, but I was looking at, it just dawned on me in that Gospel of Mary in the 9th chapter, where this competition is set up between Peter and Mary Magdalene. I was thinking about in the end of John's Gospel, where Peter wants to know about the beloved disciple, and he's basically told, don't worry about the beloved disciple, just, and then in the tomb, the scene when they run to the tomb, and there's a little competition there, running competition. And I'm wondering if the Gospel of Mary is maybe in a kind of hint that because it sets up that competition, I wonder if it's echoing or trying to in some way hint that the competition that you see in the gospel and the competition here maybe helps you to identify the beloved disciple with Mary Magdalene. That might be a stretch, but I was thinking about it as you were talking. What do you think?
Well, certainly there is some kind of competition between Peter and the beloved disciple. Yeah. Um, yeah. The thing is, the one, well, there are a couple that don't fit. One is the fishing boat in chapter 21. That's going to be a guy. But I think the idea that the beloved disciple is a very elusive figure and could well at sometimes be Mary Magdalene. Yeah.
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 I just thought of it because of that sense of competition. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's very strong in the Gospel of Mary, and it's very strong in the Gospel that there was some person that Peter was always that there was friction between
Mm-hmm.
two people, and it's
Mm-hmm.
there again. And I mean, they just might have picked that up, and it's not related at all. But I was listening to
Yeah,
it today.
and that doesn't necessarily have to be historical, huh?
Right, right.
It can be in the tradition, because there was competition for various authority figures. Some leaned more on James than Peter, and then there was the whole Johannine group, which presumably thought they were at least going after the beloved disciple, whoever that was. So yeah, there were different traditions, Mhm. Um, Okay, that was Mary. Could you comment on Ricci's theory that structure and movement, and with him were the 12 and some women in Luke, it means that the Wednesday. Oh, yeah, that with him were the 12 and some women means that the women stayed with Jesus throughout his ministry. Yeah, that's a debated thing. I wonder if it isn't a little of both. I mentioned when we were talking about the synoptics, the theory of what one scholar called local sympathizers, and they could be male or female, but that in some cases, see, I don't think we have to envision Jesus and his followers camping out every night. I think they came into villages, they made the rounds of villages, and they were received, they were given hospitality. So some of those people could be like that. The idea of women traveling with him, yeah, I mean, especially if they were older, you know. But if they're younger women, unmarried, that's difficult to imagine, really, unless they were with parents or older siblings or something like that. So there's some give and take there, I think. You have shown us that Mary, you have shown us that Mary has been a symbolic figure in so many ways, inspiring, being a model. What's your favorite way of seeing her as a model or a symbol today? I would say leadership, leadership of women. Her security that she has seen the Lord and she knows what the Lord wants her to do. I guess I would say that. I've always loved the image of Mary Magdalene in Matthew 27:61 after Jesus' burial, but Mary and the other Mary remained sitting there facing the tomb. Just the faith in that scene is so powerful. Yeah, that's remarkable in Matthew. Again, it's not anointing. They're not doing anything. They remain there sitting, looking, just taking it in, as sometimes we have to in the face of disaster. There in the Q&A. Is it surprising that there is a statement, these are the things he said to me, but nothing is recorded? Yeah. Yeah, it is. But that's the way it was. It's a summary statement, and I can imagine the gospel writer trying out his first draft, on a community of people, and he says that people say, "Oh, come on, you got to say more there." It is surprising, but it's intriguing, and it leaves room for all the speculation that then happened. There is a dynamic depiction of Mary Magdalene in Zeffirelli's. I just got cut off there. In Zeffirelli's film, telling the apostles that she's seen the Lord, and their belittling of her as women's fantasies. Yeah. Well, in Luke, it says that they went back and they told the disciples who didn't believe them. Yeah. If it were not for the resurrection scene where she becomes the first proclaimer of the resurrection, who is Mary Magdalene? Well, she'd just be one of the women disciples. She would not be in a leadership position. Is that what you mean, Maria? That's Maria's asking that.
That scene sets her apart, right? But there's nothing in the gospel, at least I don't think so, could be wrong, that prepares you for this extraordinary role that she has in the resurrection. So that's all. I mean, she hasn't done anything in particular. She hasn't, I mean, the woman at the well, you'd say, okay, well, she already had some great theological insight. So, that prepares you for her having like a real cameo appearance at the resurrection and then rising to. But the thing that strikes me about Mary Magdalene is that she goes from being a kind of person who's there in the gospel mentioned, and then all of a sudden in the resurrection she becomes this person of insight and proclamation. So I guess there's nothing in the gospel that prepares me to see her take this special role there, and that just strikes me as, because like Peter and the rest of them, they're always there and they're always doing something, they're always saying something, they're always being questioned by Jesus. But she seems to be a rather benign figure, or not three-dimensional until you get to that scene. Do you think that as well?
I do. The question just arose as you were talking. I wonder if Luke imagines her in the Pentecost scene. He says Mary, the mother of Jesus, was there, and some other women, but never says who. Which would qualify her, to be the proclaimer. We have a couple more here. Yeah, someone when remarks that she was there at the crucifixion. Yeah, sure. And presumably all the Gospels say other women too. The torture and torment of the Magdalene laundries reveals a dark side to the false legend of the penitent prostitute. Absolutely. That's the other side of the prison chaplain's pastoral complication. Absolutely. That, by the way, is the origin of the word maudlin, the Magdalene institution. You haven't said anything about Mary and the gardener. Have you? What do you think of that encounter? Well, he's not the gardener, it's Jesus. But so I'm not sure what's behind the question. Her thinking that he's the gardener would be a natural supposition, and it's the recognition when we've looked at this many times before in other contexts. It's his saying of her name that causes the recognition. Would she have recognized him by face? You know, there's a whole thing, the Emmaus group, for the Emmaus story in Luke, there's a whole thing about people not recognizing the risen Jesus. And I wonder if that would be relevant here. I think that's all we have.
Right. Anybody else? Would you like to raise your hand if you're not a typist and you would like to ask a question? Just unmute yourself, raise your hand. Lucy Rieger raised her hand. Lucy, want to speak up? Unmute yourself. There you go.
Hello, thank you for this wonderful presentation. I just wanted to make a quick comment. I had the privilege of serving at Magdala on the Sea of Galilee, and I like that we mentioned Israel tonight. We will keep that situation in our hearts. But Carolyn, you showed a few pictures. There are actually two holy sites that are adjacent. One is run by the Franciscans. It's completely walled off and it's not open to pilgrims. And then there's the holy site of Magdala that contains the synagogue and the mikveh baths and the Duke and Altum. And what was pretty exciting is that this year on the Feast of Mary Magdalene, the Franciscans held a mass on their site. So I think it's a first step to opening that up to pilgrims. So when you go, always look, if you're happen to be there, they are adjacent, but it's very, very hard to get to the Franciscan site. You have to know one of the priests. You have to have it on box for you. But it was in your pictures. It's so interesting, you know, depicting the archaeology there. So they're
Thank you very much for saying that. I didn't realize that the Franciscan place was still looking about the same. They haven't built anything on it?
They have they are actually build a small guest house. They were renovating. They did more excavations there. It's very evident that it was a port because they have like where the ships were moored. It's very, very cool. And the Via Maris connects the two properties, and they're hoping eventually they'll be able to make that connection and open it up.
That's terrific. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you for everything.
Rita.
Oh, thank you. Let me put my hand down. Another great presentation. Thank you so much, Carolyn. I just a little advertisement tomorrow. I have the privilege of co-leading a tour of Mary Magdalene in art at the Metropolitan Museum with faculty from 91st Street. As for that, I had to document all of the scripture texts that are relevant to the art objects. So once we do a run through on it and see if it's understandable, I'll share that with you.
Yes,
but
good, thank you.
Yeah, but one of the things, of course, looking for feedback. One of the things I really I have two thoughts. One, I've just been reading this really good book. It's by two Italian biblical scholars, and one of them, when she introduced her Mary Magdalene, she said she was in Africa, like in 75, as a very young student and a guest of the local bishop, and heard an Italian missionary interpreting the story of the Passion and claiming that Mary Magdalene was the one who betrayed Jesus with a kiss. And when she objected, he said, "Oh, it doesn't matter who betrayed him. And it might as well be her." And so this is before I even read that, I have had the premonition, trepidation that we could get Magdalene laundries again. I interviewed James, I think it's M. Smith, professor at Boston College, who's Irish, and he's an English professor, and he never heard about the Magdalene laundries in his teenage years. That was very hidden. They're right, you know. They tried to get rid of the last one, but protesters have kept it open as a monument to what happened. And he's done extensive research with the Justice for Magdalene's research project. And they interview survivors. And when you read what premise was used to put a young girl in, like if you went to the police in your small town and complained that you were being sexually molested by a relative, and they didn't believe you, and if you went back multiple times, you could just land in the laundry at the age of 15. Right. And anyhow, my fear is that as Catholicism is spreading so rapidly in major areas, large areas of the world, and if we don't, and it is not widespread, knowledge about that the penitent prostitute is a false legend.
Yeah, but it's still there a lot.
It's there, and one thing that Gregory did in his homily was he made her Augustine had already started this and made her the embodiment of sin. And if we don't have educated missionaries and real biblical, real insistence, I mean, I would love the Vatican to issue a rejection of the penitent prostitute. I know that would hurt some people who rely on it, spiritually and emotionally, but the thought that we could end up with Magdalene laundries, but one of Smith's research elements was he interviewed one of the women who wrote the biography or history of one of the orders that was one of the most prominent orders in running the laundries. Very self-justified, stuff in there. But he discovered that there was absolutely no effort to do a spiritual, use this, penitence, the forgiveness of the supposed penitent to help the girls. And it was just a trope. It was a trope used to punish them. So I feel strongly about having a much bigger movement to get the top officials in our church rejecting that formally. And anyhow, I just wanted to throw that out. Anyone have suggestions how to approach this? And also there's a petition now that's still open from Future Church to get that. You mentioned, thank you, how John 20, it's 10 to 18, when Peter leaves, that verse is never read even on a weekday. They cannot admit that he left. That's my theory. You're kinder. You say they just think it was important. My theory is that the men who put together the lectionary in the late 60s could not accept that Peter left and she stayed and she witnessed. I'll end my soapbox.
Okay.
But any
Thank
ideas? I think there's a lot of work to be done. But thank you for being part of it.
Thank you, Rita.
Well, on that note, it is now 8:16 and we have to wrap it up. But I think tonight, anyone who is here present probably has very close to her heart and mind the situation in Israel between the Jewish people and the Palestinian people. When you look at Magdala, when you look at the very Pacific scene that we just saw in Israel at the Sea of Galilee, you know that is not what is going on there tonight. So whatever your political persuasion, I think the most important thing, Nicholas Kristof had a beautiful piece yesterday, and he said, if you care about the slaughter of the Israeli children, you are a real human rights advocate. But if you don't also care about the slaughter of the Palestinian children, then you're no advocate for human rights at all. So tonight, let's pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and let us pray that peace will descend on this country again, and that with the help of God, there will be some way found to bring these people to live in peace again. So good night, everyone. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Great session. Good night.